Siblings Hansel and Gretel are left alone in the woods by their parents, and soon must defend themselves against a witch. This sends them down a path of becoming professional witch hunters, and now the grown-up Hansel and Gretel, played by Jeremy Renner and Gemma Arterton, find themselves investigating a series of child abductions that point toward the biggest gathering of witches in history, and that can't be good. Along the way, they discover clues about their past and la-di-la-la-la-la. Okay, you probably have a decent idea as to the structure of this film. It's one of those overblown, goofy concept action films like Van Helsing or The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or The Mummy, films that cannot really be said to be all that good, but their negative qualities are subdued to the point of easily being able to ignore them. These films are what I think of when I think of fluff entertainment, of roller coaster entertainment. Films that are colorful, pretty stupid but largely inoffensive, and giving us a big imagery that you can only find in the movies. I take 1,000 films like this over another Transformers sequel. Interestingly enough, compared to other films I just listed, Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters is an R-rated film, when it seems like it wouldn't have been that hard to make it a PG-13. There's cursing, blood splatters, and nudity in the film, but not any really crucial scenes, and comparing some of the scenes to the trailer, it seems alternate takes were shot with less blood and the cursing absent. It's rather rare to see a studio take the R rating when a PG-13 is possible. I have no idea what the implications are there, that major studios are aiming to be more dangerous or something. I doubt it. There's really little to say about the actual plot here. There's some minor investigation, the characters pull out a new steampunk light weapon every 15 minutes or so. You know, we really haven't had that big breakout steampunk movie. Well, there have been a few good ones, but nothing that's done to this weird niche genre like what The Matrix did to cyberpunk. The action scenes here are mostly loud and kind of competently shot, with lots of breakaway scenery and fires and stuff. There's a few cute jokes, including one about diabetes, which is not something you get to say every day. The single best thing about the film is a character named Edward, a troll that's about 95% realized using practical effects and puppetry. I think there's a little CGI enhancement in the face, but otherwise it seems like something pulled straight out of the Jim Henson workshop, and that's pretty damn awesome. He's also pretty much the best character in the whole film. So yeah, the film is kind of loud and stupid, but it was fun enough to warrant a trip to the theater, though maybe for matinee prices. But before I leave it at that, I want to address a criticism some people have been lobbing at the film. Not all people, not most, but some film critics, most prominently Movie Bob over at The Escapist, as they have been calling this film out for being misogynistic, which is frankly just incorrect. Yes, because witches are the main villains in the film, we have a lot of scenes of female characters getting hurt and murdered. I can't help you if that makes you personally feel uncomfortable, but the implication here is not that the filmmakers hate women, so here's a bunch of them in harm's way. It's that the filmmakers wanted to make a film where everyone was on equal ground. Men tend to lead most action films because men are considered a disposable gender. That's a fact that's been evolved into us over thousands of years. Which is not to say that this film is trying to be a counterpoint, a film to make up for the hundreds of films with huge male body counts. Just that it does not let our instinctive, knee-jerk, women must be protected reactions to getting in the way of telling this story. And it's not like a lot of men don't get punishment in this film either. Hell, the worst that happens to Gretel is getting punched a lot. Hansel gets stabbed and dragged through a stone wall. Male characters get their heads blown off, they explode via dark magic, they get torn apart by trolls. It's not as lopsided as some claim it is. Some have mentioned that Gretel gets injured and nursed back to health twice in this film as a bit of victimhood fetishizing. And you know, there might be something to that, but they all seem to be ignoring that this exact same thing happens to Hansel. He too gets injured and nursed back to health twice, and in both cases, the first time is just a bit of cheesecake, while the second time is a legit emotional moment. I don't know what the hell you people want. But again, that's not even what most critics are saying. I just want to cut this kind of conversation off at the pass. You already know your tolerance for stupid but easy watching cinema, and Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters is maybe one of the better examples of it. It stinks. I really like Jason Statham. He's a decent actor and our only really consistent action star at the moment. He does his own stunts, isn't a really old guy banking on 80s nostalgia, and could easily kill me in a single punch. Even in his lesser films, he has a great and legitimate presence. Sadly, Parker is one of those lesser films. What had the promise of being a solid crime flick falters from an unfocused script and poor characters. The titular Parker is a professional criminal who gets backstabbed after assisting in the robbery of an Ohio State fair. Shot and left for dead, Parker begins his quest for revenge as his former partners plan a diamond heist in Palm Springs. Along the way, he gets stuck with Leslie Rogers, played by Jennifer Lopez, a real estate agent who sees Parker as a way out of her serious money woes. Parker is a character from a series of novels by the late Donald E. Westlake, and it has been put to screen before, though up until now Parker films have changed the name of its main character for some reason. Actors to play the character before this include Mel Gibson, Lee Marvin, Jim Brown, Robert Duvall, and French actress Anna Karina. The hell? I haven't read any of the books, so I can't say how accurate this version compares to its literary counterpart, but with any luck, a lot of liberties were taken because film Parker is an inconsistent and uninteresting bit of work. He's the focal point of the entire movie. We follow him from minute one, and yet we never get a firm grasp as to just what makes him more better and more special and more interesting than the other thugs he works with. At first they play up this angle of him being a crook with a moral code. He won't steal from people who can't afford it, and he won't hurt people who don't deserve it. And then we see him steal car after car to keep the police and, the mob or whatever off his back. He's not stealing cars from rich people, he's stealing them from common folk who probably can't afford another vehicle. And then they can't get to their jobs, and then they foreclose on their houses, and yeah, Parker potentially fucks up a lot of innocent lives on his quest for petty revenge. But even without that, the whole code thing just feels like a lot of hot air. Then they try to play up him as a chess master kind of criminal, one who stays 3 steps ahead of everyone else, but that doesn't really go anywhere either. We get one scene of him setting some things up that'll pay off near the end of the film, and they even botch that up by reminding the audience of it at the wrong time and ruining the aha moment. Truth is, there's nothing special about Parker as a character, nothing that makes him exceptional to those around him except that he's dating the daughter of a minor crime boss who gives him a few connections, I guess. So we're basically following average Joe criminal for a whole movie, which is not automatically a bad thing, but the film itself thinks the Parker character is something special, someone to send shivers down the spines of lesser crooks. We just see too much of him. We always have him under the microscope, and the seams show pretty early. And I really need to get into the script drafting business, because I feel there was a really good movie hiding in here. And I think the key to this is to shift the focus away from Parker and onto Jennifer Lopez's character. Leslie Rogers almost plays like the perfect point of view character, someone from the outside discovering the world Parker lives in. The problem with that is that she's introduced halfway into the film, and by that point, we've already discovered that world because we've been following Parker this entire time. This is really the point where the film should have started. It almost writes itself. We have this woman, divorced, pushing 40 and living with her mother in a dead-end real estate job, struggling to keep her car from being repossessed, and when her car does get taken, it's a big deal to her, which again puts those cars Parker stole into perspective. She's a financially troubled person living in fucking Palm Springs, with more millionaires per square mile than any other place in the world. So when Parker falls into her life, there's a strong temptation towards helping his criminal activities. And if we introduce the character here, we could see Parker as Roger sees Parker, a mysterious stranger. If we don't follow Parker at all, only seeing him when Roger sees him, we keep the character in the shadows and not expose just how flimsy of a character he actually is. Less is more, and by only showing us fragments of Parker, the audience's imaginations could do all the heavy lifting and fill in the rest. There's a scene where Parker arrives at Roger's house all beat up and bloody. We see the fight scene that resulted in those injuries, but imagine seeing this from Roger's perspective. She comes home to find this man she's trying to work with on her porch, who was just fine last time she saw him, and now he's completely destroyed. It would drive home how dangerous things are, and would make us question just what's going on in the margins of the film. Really, a script rewrite or a strong re-editing could have turned this mediocre and forgettable film into something worth watching. The action scenes are just okay, though this is the first time I've seen fades used to cut between shots during a fight. It was weird, and it didn't really work. And with that, there's nothing for the film to offer. It's sad, really, because I got the sense of a lot of potential in its DNA. I imagine that trying to co-op Japanese horror was a far more novel idea back in 1982 than it is now. For the last decade, we've had that wave of imported Japanese horror films and their various remakes, and for the better, in my opinion. The horror culture clash of films like Ringu and Dark Waters and Ju-on, The Grudge, and games like Silent Hill injected the Western genre with a sense of fresh weirdness and psychological danger that had been lacking for a while. In fact, the last time horror got such a shot in the arm was, well, around the time this film came out. The House Where Evil Dwells falls largely at the tail end of a haunted house revival, with the Amityville Horror in 1979, and The Shining and The Changeling in 1980, and coming out around the same time as Tobe Hooper's and Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist. Filmmakers were finding creative energy in ghosts again, and director Kevin Connor of Motel Hell fame took the genre to Japan, with a story about an American family moving to Kyoto, only to find themselves in a house haunted by the three spirits, that of an adulterous wife and her lover, who was murdered by her husband, who then committed suicide. These ghosts seem hell-bent on recreating this tragic love affair with their home's new occupants. Well, sadly, what sounds like the most unique and interesting film of this era turns out to be the most uninspired and poorly executed. I really had high hopes going into this, as the film opens with the original murders and suicide 100 years ago, and it's so well filmed, shot in this really affecting slow motion, and has this rattling score and some really photogenic shots. However, when things get to modern day, 1982, quality starts to plummet. While the film takes place in Japan and uses some iconography from Buddhism and Japanese theater, most of the horror elements are just reskinned Western haunted house tropes. Lamps and faucets turn on and off on their own, things move when nobody's looking, and the ghosts themselves show up as traditional blue-hued Obi-Wan Kenobi back from the dead style spirits. That last part proves problematic. While the special effects are actually really well done, with some impeccably timed double exposure, the three ghosts are just way too present, and the more we see them mess around with the family, the sillier they get, to the point that by the end they almost feel like the Three Stooges. The rule of less is more would have really helped things out here. Most of the scares flop. I laughed several times when the film really wanted me to be creeped out, the biggest one being when the daughter character sees a face in her soup. Between the corny effect and the god-awful child actress, it was hilarious. I harp on child actors a lot, but the one in this film has to be in the top 3 worst I've ever seen, and she has to be at least 12 when this film was made. That's usually when you know if the kid has any raw talent or not. Here's a fact that I think gets to the heart of it. Her name is Amy Barrett, and she was in 2 films before this. In Caged Heat, she plays a girl named Amy. In Humanoids from the Deep, she played a girl named Amy. In this film, she plays a girl named Amy. It would not surprise me if this girl had a really hard time properly responding to other characters if they called her by any name besides her real one. Not that there's a great range of acting here elsewhere. Edward Albert, who plays the husband Ted, maintains a blank stare throughout the entire thing. He's more wooden than a great oak tree. Doug McClure does a bit better as Ted's brother, but the best of the lot here is Susan George as the wife Laura, who seems to be the only one here showing any sign of life, from huge panic attacks, even if things causing them aren't that scary, to emotional breakdowns and the occasional spiritual possession. It's pretty typical Scream Queen stuff, but at least there's energy behind it. Really, outside of the pre-opening credit stuff, there's only one scene involving demonic crabs that truly causes any kind of jolt to the system, and it's the only one that feels distinctively inspired by Japanese horror. Otherwise, you could have easily have done this exact same movie in a haunted Southern Belle mansion in Louisiana or a crumbling castle in Romania. The film does not take advantage of its location and surrounding culture. I mean, there's a monk in the movie, but he's basically filling in the Catholic priest role from any other ghost film. Yeah, if you were expecting Lost in Translation meets Amityville, you'll be sadly disappointed. Well, see you next week.